Mark Barlet, How to Change the Unchangeable from the Outside In, My Road to Game Accessibility.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to walk around a little bit because it makes for a better talk and just makes me more comfortable. I want to acknowledge our interpreters and the people over here because of gaming. I'm going to talk about gaming, and unless they're gamers, they're going to have a really hard time right now. So my name is Mark Barlet. I am the founder and the executive director of the Able Gamers charity. I took this picture. I was explaining to my corgi, who is my comfort animal, that I was leaving and that she couldn't come with me. So this was our conversation. It didn't go well. I always like to start with a warning, and a warning for me is that I'm not always as politically correct as people expected me to be. I'm a person with disabilities. I work with people with disabilities all the time, and sometimes we make a lot of jokes about it. And so language is always changing. So if I use some language that's just not perfect, I apologize ahead of time. I also do want to give you guys a warning. I have narcolepsy, so there's a chance that I might stop for 10 or 15 seconds. Don't panic, I'll be back. I wanted to tell you guys some stories because I did create and mainstream game accessibility. There was a lot of people talking about it in the academic circles, but no one was really a gamer advocating for people with disabilities. When my sister, who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, found in 2004 that MS decided that her mousing hand wasn't going to work, we really kind of took that, and I said, wait a second. While my disability doesn't affect my gaming, I'm watching my best friend, my sister, we use video games to stay connected, and I'm seeing it being taken away from her because of a disability. So I started Yahooing for answers, because for you young people, Google hadn't been invented yet. And I really didn't find anything. And so I'm a technologist, and so I took that upon myself to create something where I want to kind of give you the end of this story so you understand. Who saw the adaptive controller that Xbox just put out? So I helped create that. When I started this journey in 2004, I literally had game developers tell me to piss off when I asked them about how people with disabilities played their video games because they were scared and disability was hard. And now you fast forward 14 years later, and you can go down to the Microsoft store, and I know there's one here, and you can buy a controller for someone with disabilities. So I want to tell you that journey. First story I want to tell you is about World of Warcraft. Who here's played World of Warcraft? A lot of people. Who here wished they played World of Warcraft? Who wishes they were doing it right now? True. So I have a confession to make, and the confession I have to make is I am a bully when it comes to accessibility, and I want to tell you why. At the height of World of Warcraft, there were 12 million people playing that game every month. It has over 100 million accounts. How big is that? Well, I just made this slide for you guys. It is the entire population of Victoria and New South Wales were playing this game at the height of it. Now, as you can imagine, there were a lot of people with disabilities playing that game. Why wouldn't there be? Statistically, 20% probably were. And people with disabilities were using things like macro keyboards, things like that, so they could kind of get a little bit of a leg up in a game that was really designed poorly. And they were getting banned because World of Warcraft, Blizzard was doing these, looking at keystrokes and saying, these people are using macros, they're cheating. And they were reaching out to us, and they were reaching out to us because Blizzard, like a celebrity or anything, has shells of people around them. When you love a game, you can't run up to Katy Perry. Katy Perry has layers and layers. Games are the same way. So people with disabilities were writing into their customer service saying, hey, you banned my account, why? I have spinal muscular atrophy and I'm just using this keyboard because your game sucks. It's a button nightmare. And they weren't getting anywhere, so they were reaching out to us. Now, unfortunately, we were on the outside too, so the same challenges that they were having, we were having. So I got an opportunity to go to GDC in 2009. GDC is the Game Developers Conference. It is the largest video game conference for developers. It's not an external thing, it's an internal thing. And I thought to myself, how could I possibly get Blizzard to pay attention to me? And so I created a t-shirt. And the t-shirt said, Blizzard hates disabled gamers. Ask me for details. Look, I know how to get through the shell. Now, I put out on into my developer friends that this t-shirt existed. I didn't wear the shirt yet. I just wanted them to know the shirt existed. And on the first day of GDC, there was a panel where Pardo, who is the CEO of Blizzard, was on the panel. And just like I expect you guys to do, except for there's a talk right after mine, I expect you guys to rush the dais at the end to ask me all these amazing questions. I knew we were going to be able to do the same thing. So Pardo was on this panel, and at the end, he's sitting at the end, and he's holding court, as I like to call him. He's looking around. And he looks at me, and he goes like this, and he goes, so what's up? And I said, hey, I want to talk to you on why you hate people with disabilities. And he goes, you and I need to talk. I mean, immediately, he was like, you and I need to talk. And I, as I'm looking at him, handing my business card to all of the press people that have now turned to look at me. So he said, do you mind waiting over to the side? And I said, certainly. And I moved to the side of the stage along with 4 other people from press who seemed to think this was a far more interesting story than the pros and cons of microtransactions in an MMO space, which was called the Asian model versus the American model. And so he came over to the end and he's like, so I heard about this shirt. And I just said, well, what shirt? And he says, no, I hear there's a shirt that's really disparaging to Blizzard. And I said, no, there's a shirt that's clearly truthful. And he said, well, what do you want? And I said, I need a way to talk to somebody within the organization so that I can get people with disabilities unbanned. Because when you ban a person with disabilities out of your game, you're literally collapsing their social circle. And so he said, well, are you going to be at this other thing that was the next day? And I said, of course I am. It was the IDGA meetup for accessibility. Why wouldn't I be there? I think at the time I was actually the chair. And he said, well, I'll send 2 people there, and they will be your contacts. And I looked, this guy who's he drove there from his house in a Lamborghini, and I said, well, if they're not, I have a beautiful shirt to wear. And they were there. And we talked, and I told them what they wanted, and they actually became really good friends, and they turned to Able Gamers because they said, look, the reason why we ignored it is because we thought it was bullshit. We don't understand disabilities, and we just kind of thought people were just finding a way out of it. And I said, well, why don't you lean on us? We're disability advocates. We know the questions to ask. And we actually formed a relationship that lasted years. Now no one cares about World of Warcraft anymore, thank goodness. But we actually would be able to help a person who had gotten banned. We would ask them, well, what were you using? Oh, I was using, a G7 keyboard, which has those little M's on the side. And I wrote a macro to do this. And I would oftentimes improve their macro because they could get much better. And then I would actually reach out to these 2 people and say, look, here's the username. This person has muscular dystrophy, or this person is using this technology, and here's why. And they would unban them. And what I was doing was, not that I cared about World of Warcraft. If you can't tell, I hate that game. I was an EverQuest guy. But I understood the importance of making sure that people with disabilities had their communities back. So, That's the first story I want to tell you on why I'm a bully. The second story I want to tell you is solving the case for missing accessibility. Now, I meant to say at the beginning, I have a lot of slides up here, but very, very little of these slides have any real information on them. There will be some information later on, and I have a way to let you guys know, but these are really just for me. In fact, yeah, I appreciate it. I actually want you not to even look at them. They're really for me. So there was this really gruesome game called LA Noire that was put out by Rockstar. Who's played that game? It's a pretty violent game, actually made in Australia. If you guys didn't know that, it was made by an Aussie team. If he's in this room because there's part of a story, I'm sorry, it really wasn't me. So me and Steve Spahn, who's my chief operating officer, we were roaming the floor at the Penny Arcade Expo, PAX East. It's in Boston. It's a giant video game convention. And there was this huge booth for LA Noire, and for my wheelchair users, they triple carpeted it. Triple carpeted it. It was like walking through sand. We go up to the booth, and this really amazing guy named Mario wanted to see if we wanted to skip the line to play the game. And I literally said, because my friend was in a power wheelchair, it's impossible for us to get there. And he's like, well, what would you guys want? And I said, we want to talk to somebody about accessibility in this game. And this, what I like to call a hired booth lady, she's like, oh, I don't really know anything about that. I should probably go find you somebody. So she took this little checklist that we had. We were a little charity. We were trying to make games accessible. And she skirted into this dark booth. She sludged through the 3 layers of carpet. She came out and she's like, someone's coming. I'm like, awesome. And this Aussie guy came out. Sorry, he was Aussie. And he had our piece of paper rolled up really tightly in a really clenched fist. And he looks at me, and he doesn't acknowledge my friend Steve, who's in a power wheelchair that was literally right here next to me on my left, and goes, what do you want? And I said, well, we'd like to talk to you about how your game operates and accessibility and things like that. It's a really awesome title. And he wadded up our piece of paper, and he says, well, I don't have time for this shit. And he walked back into the booth, literally while we were standing there. Who here knows about Twitter? Show of hands for Twitter. Yes? You guys know about it? So I pull out my phone, and Able Gamers only had 3,900 followers. If it happened today, we have almost 45,000, so we probably would have blown up the internet. But I kind of put a tweet out that said something to the effect of, at Rockstar, don't give a shit about accessibility, hashtag LA Noire. We go about our day, just going about eating really terrible, expensive hot dogs and trudging through buying pins. At 5:30 in the morning, I get up, which is one of the beauties about narcolepsy. And there's an email in my inbox, and it's from an executive at Rockstar. And that executive at Rockstar says, hey, something happened on Twitter. We'd like more information. So at 5:30 in the morning, I write my doctoral thesis on what I believed happened, and get a response back. And the response back was, well, we heard something similar to that. Let us do some investigations. They came back and said that I was alone, and that the gentleman that had wadded up our paper said was the guy in the wheelchair hiding behind a plant. I'm like, no. She got on the phone with me, and I come to find out this was the vice president of publishing for Rockstar. For my gamers out there, you guys know Rockstar is like the most aloof organization out there. Like, you have a better chance of, bumping into the president of the United States than you do bumping into a Rockstar office. I live in DC, so it's actually happened to me. And she says, well, what do you guys want? And now, I don't really ask for a lot. I said, well, I'd like you to get a couple of developers in the room, and let's just have a conference call to talk about accessibility. I really kind of saw this as an opportunity to share this knowledge. And she said, no. She goes, I think we've done you wrong. Why don't you come to New York and talk to us about accessibility? I said, well, wait, I can't afford that. We have like We had like $1,000 in the bank as a charity. New York sounds expensive. And she goes, no, we'll pay for it. I'm like, sure, we'll go. Why not? So I live in Washington, D.C. My friend Steve lives in Pittsburgh. So I drove to Pittsburgh and we took the train. And I will tell you, it was the most fun weekend I'd ever had. They had 3 people waiting at Penn Station for us. They had rented an accessible van for Steve. They put us up at the Tribeca Hotel, which is owned by Robert De Niro. Each room cost $1,200 a night, and they put 4 rooms together, so we were really happy. I'll tell you how great this was. There was a sign in the tub that said, do not leave this tub unattended. It fills in 90 seconds. That's how amazing this hotel room was. This tub could fit like 3 bodies. And because I had to test this, I'm a tester, turned 90 seconds later, the tub is full. Like, I've never seen this volume of water. It's like the scene from Carrie over and over and over. They took us to the studio the next day, and we talked to the developers. And we toured the studio. We were the first outside organization ever to be invited into Rockstar. One of the great cool things was Steve needed to load up to the van, and there was no place on the curb for him to get onto his van. So he got to ask Robert De Niro's personal driver to move Robert De Niro's Rolls Royce so that his van could pull up. So Steve has this brag where he's like, yeah, I made Robert De Niro move to let me get in my van. The first Day Zero patch, which is the patch that comes out right after the game, had 5 accessibility changes to it. They ended up actually donating $25,000 to Able Gamers so that we could go to PAX the next year, and really became really good friends. And that's the story of Able Gamers and why we do what we do, because we so understand the value of video games for people with disabilities. I do have some pictures up here of some kids playing at some of our events. One of the ones I want to highlight is this kid in orange. His name was Gideon, and we were at this really terrible event in New Jersey, like no one showed up. He actually worked there with his mom, and we had Fruit Ninja, another Aussie-developed game, by the way, on Connect. And I'm not sure the nature of this young man's disability, but he had hands but no arms. So they had been deleted. And he kept kind of walking up to the Connect, and he was trying to get Fruit Ninja to work, and it just wasn't seeing his movements. And we had packed all of our stuff. You see all of our stuff. It was really expensive and really important to us because we only had $1,000 in the bank, and some of that stuff cost $1,000 in these little green foams. So I just handed him a little green foam, and he played Fruit Ninja for 3.5 hours. And this last picture at the very bottom is actually his mom, and you see his mom's crying because she never thought that her son would be doing something that all the friends would do. Able Gamers has a fun first philosophy. This talk actually comes from another talk that I talked about. It's called the F Word. And we were talking about fun. And fun and play are so important for everyone. Who here plays? Who here likes to have fun? See, it's pretty universal. I'm on to something. I'm good. And as had been alluded earlier, we have the power of a computer from the 90s in our phone right now. And indie developers are developing games all the time. The indies have kind of destroyed gaming in such a great way because the most simple story can be told. And as these indie developers are trying so hard to find market differentiators. So they've always come up to us and said, hey, Mark, I want to make a game for those with multiple sclerosis. What? No, you don't. No, I want to make a game for muscular dystrophy. And this third one is real. So if anyone can figure out the game for this, let me know. A developer asked me, I want to make a game for third stage kidney disease. And I can't even imagine what that, what's the, first off, I'm not really sure what the accessibility ramifications are for stage 3 kidney disease. And I'm not really sure what you're supposed to learn from it, but maybe it's, I do have a title for it, if anyone, which is called Transplant List. And maybe you have to fight your way to the top. See, I can say these things, you guys can't. I say that to say that if you're asking me the question, I want to make a game for, and you insert a disability, you failed. Because that's not what we want to do. Who here only wants to play by themselves? See, there's a few, and I get that. Who here goes out with friends? So we have this fun first philosophy. People with disabilities are looking for experience to support their needs and what they need and what they want in their family. And 56% of people play games that are online. 42% play with friends, 19% with family, 17% with parents, and like me, 16% with spouses. Having a disability can be very isolating, as we know. I'm from the United States, and we're a big, big country, just like Australia is a big country. I don't know if anyone's priced an accessibility van. In the United States, we have terrible public transportation, so you almost have to have a vehicle. But like this crappiest Chrysler town and country, which is to me like where your soul goes to die, it's like a $25,000 van, but to get it made into an accessible van, it's a $75,000 vehicle. So it's not covered under our healthcare, under any kind of Medicaid program. So there are so many people with disabilities in the United States, especially in rural America, that are just trapped. And video games gives them that opportunity to get out there and discover the world. And what we've done as an organization is we've changed the name from I want to make a game for, and it's I want to make a game that supports. When I started this organization, everyone looked at me like I was silly. But I can tell you guys right now, the adaptive controller, I know for a fact that Microsoft has accessibility guidelines for all of their future games. I know that because I helped them write it. PlayStation, the same thing. We're now seeing in gaming where finding an accessible game, Able Gamers gave up its game reviews. We spent a ton of time doing reviews for games, and now we don't do it anymore because it's actually easier for us to point out games that don't have accessibility than it is do have accessibility. I want to show, because this is a little bit of a humble brag, to prove that point. This is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. It came out last week. And at the top of it, you see my team, Accessibility Able Gamers. I have my first game credit. But imagine this. In an industry that literally could care less about people with disabilities 10 years ago, to one of the hottest selling games in the country, I've actually played through this game. I'm done with it. I've had it for months. So does anyone want to know how it ends? I can tell you. It was alluded to earlier today. Through all of my work, I've also learned one other cool little thing. Accessibility is looked at as two different ways. There are people that are born disabled, and this group is looking for analogs for their non-disabled friends oftentimes. And then there are people like me who became disabled. And I know someone talked about the chances of being accessible and kind of developing for your future self. I always say disability is a really easy club to join, but it's a really hard club to get out of. For me, I actually just fell down some stairs and became an incomplete paraplegic while I was active duty military. I'll prove it. There I am. I was actually on this plane, Air Force One, when it took this picture over Mount Rushmore. President Clinton wasn't on it at the time. I just happened to be friends with the crew chief, and he's like, hey, you want to go fly on Air Force One today? The answer is always yes. So we actually, Able Gamers in the University of York, just did a study, and I wanted to kind of give you guys some information about gamers with disabilities, players with disabilities, because this is fairly new information. The study was published a month and a half ago. There's some opportunities for you to guess some things. I will say that the only thing I really have to tell you is it's funded via Research Prime funding at the University of York through the Justice and Equality theme from the Murrell Center of Toleration. I have to say that because they paid for the bulk of it. There are a lot of graphs going forward for my visually impaired and blind friends. You can go to bit.ly/AbleGamer67 for a complete PDF of all of the numbers that make up the graphs that follow. So if you really want to dive deep, here's your opportunity. So we asked a bunch of people, and our makeup of our study was mainly about 50% had some kind of physical disability. From there, 12% were other, but we had learning disabilities, hard of hearing, blind, deaf. All the way through the spectrum was represented in this. So it was one of the first big comprehensive looks at players with disabilities. Number one game that players with disabilities are playing right now, Destiny 2. Who's playing Destiny? Not me. Anyone want to guess what number 2 is? Or just sadly, it's World of Warcraft. This game is like, I have a terrible way of saying it, so I'm not going to say it here. It just is the gift that keeps on giving. Like herpes. Anyone want to guess what the number 3 game is? I'll give you a hint. Blizzard's rolling in that player with disability dough. It's Overwatch. Who here plays Overwatch? I actually play this game. It's great. I play a couple of different characters. I'm not good at any of them. We asked the group about AT usage, and 32% of players with disabilities are using AT, which is kind of higher than what we expected. The breakdown of the AT is actually other technology followed by custom controllers, alternate mouse devices, screen readers, alternate controllers, eye gaze style technology, one-handed controllers, and then I'd really like to talk to the people that are using VR. So, options. So we asked players with disabilities about the options that they use. And the number, 67% of participants said that they use some kind of option within a game. The number one being key remapping. 27% of those that were in this study said they remapped the keys from what the developer originally wanted. Number 2 was subtitles at 25%. Now, what was really interesting, as I put in a note here, was keep in mind that the study only identified 2% of the group as deaf and 5% of the group as hard of hearing. I will tell you there's another study that we've already done and we're working on getting it published, where we looked at the actual different things that are available, and autistic individuals turn on subtitling all the time. A lot of the cognitive disabilities really lead to subtitles as a help for understanding. It also is an ability to slow down the game. And 11% use enlarged text. And again, keep in mind only 3%, oh, it's right here, I could just read it off here. 12% identified as low vision and 3% as blind, but 11% wanted to make the text bigger. This was important to me, and was who do we play with? This is a lot of numbers, but I just want to say what the numbers is. Very few people play by themselves. Very few people. We play with our friends. Who here has several games that you're playing, and you go play the game that has the friends you want to hang with on it? Sometimes I play Overwatch because the people that are playing Overwatch are the people I want to hang with. Sometimes I go play a completely different game because I want to go hang with. And sometimes I play by myself because I'm feeling antisocial. But this is the breakdown of how people are playing and who they're playing with. Multiplayer, one-on-one, co-op, so are they playing with friends? Interestingly enough, a lot of games that we're finding have these abilities to create your own groups, and autistic individuals will team up with their friends because they want that safe space of knowing that they're hanging with people that understand who they are. You'll find that among the physically disabled, unless they're very, very proficient at the game, they'll oftentimes hang around in groups that are, again, more curated because they might be playing a specialized role or something like that that complements their disability. And the most important is why we play. Anyone want to guess the number one reason why people play? Fun. To have fun is the number one. 98.7% chose this as their number one. Number two, it helps me relax. 86.5% of those surveyed said they use gaming to relax. Number three, to be a part of a community. 171 of 230 people. Why I didn't turn that into a percentage, I don't know, except that I think I was tired of the same sentence. Want to participate with their friends. Number four, to challenge myself. 77% of people said, I use video games to challenge myself. I want to be better. I want that opportunity. 160 of the 230 said to escape reality. Who here uses video games to escape? Raise them high and raise them proud. I don't play, so I was actually in the military in the first Gulf War, and I was a medic, and I went to Kuwait to break down hospitals. I didn't do anything fun. But I don't play any like modern warfare style games because they're uncomfortable for me. I love Battlefield 1, and I love the original Battlefield because those were historically based, so I didn't really have a frame of reference. But I've walked through Iraq, so I had a little bit of a frame of reference, and I was really just uncomfortable in those games. And the last reason is to socialize. 65% of the participants said they use this to socialize. I encourage everyone, if you want to read this complete study, you can. It is published on, I have another little link here, which is bit.ly/ablegamers979. That will take you to the link of this study, or I can describe the QR code that's here. It's a good joke, you should use that later. Questions? This is a great slide, by the way. And then there's little Lego Star Wars people racing little bikes. I think my time is right?
Yeah, we have time for questions.
Questions?
Thanks for your talk, Mark. I was wondering, are there any genres in gaming that are particularly difficult for people with disabilities? Like, do you find particular challenges with any certain genres in particular?
So my generic answer is everything is accessible to everybody, or not at all, but is shooters. So you'll actually see in shooters now there's more support classes. If anyone's played, for instance, Battlefield 1, there's a couple of support classes. I actually play an ammo support person almost all the time. Those classes are actually designed to make the game more accessible to people who aren't really good at Twitch style shooting. It used to be called Twitch, which is you have to be perfect. So the solution that game companies have come up with is to create new classes that support people, not because they want people with disabilities playing their game. They want more people buying the game, and so people with disabilities get to play in those classes, but they also want to make sure that the wife of the husband that's really into it also has a class that they can play. So, does that answer your question? Come on, guys, I have 3 more minutes.
mentioned that, and this is more from a personal point of view, as I am an old gamer when I used to have vision, and I'm talking about old.
You don't look a day over 32.
Yeah, Space Invaders, best game. How, in relation to those sort of arcade games, is there in the mainstream products for people who can't see that screen right now, who can't, total vision, total blind? I know low vision probably have more success, but is there many games out there? Because when I've gone to the app stores or things of that nature, I always come away disappointed.
So I will say the indie world is doing a better job of creating content for everyone, but I'll be honest with you, you're going to be disappointed for a while longer. There are a couple of really good blind games. I know Street Fighter, for instance, if you want, is actually really blind friendly and has been since the 80s. Even the newest one is blind friendly. How it's blind friendly is every single move actually has its own independent sound. So if you learn what you're hearing, there's actually some really successful blind Street Fighter people. I could probably win in a real fight with them, but not in a Street Fighter fight.
That would be interesting. What about 3D sound? Is anyone doing 3D sound technology in this space? Because I see that's a real player, and virtual reality is the other one.
So there are some work going on in 3D sound. The reason why 3D sound, true what's called spatial sound, because it's not even really 3D, it's full spatial, is there's a couple of patents that are owned by people that want a lot of money to use the patent. So a lot of game companies kind of walk away from it because they just can't afford the hurdle. The patent actually expires in 3 years. This is what I do, is keep an eye on these things. So I'm hopeful that we'll start seeing more true spatial sound in the coming years. I think I have time for one more. Anyone? Bueller?
I'm Teresa Ramirez. I'm an industrial designer, and I'm with Digital Gap. So these are all in the same domain I'm thinking of. I'm just wondering what was the experience of people with disabilities with virtual reality?
So that's a great question. My answer is going to be not as great. I don't know yet. I think for people with disabilities, VR is going to be great if you do that experiential thing, where you get to go to the top of a mountain or you get to experience something. I love those things. VR gaming, I hate. I have two VR. There's a VR up there. I have the Daydream as my phone, and I have an Oculus Rift, and I love To the Moon, which walks you through how the Apollo program, and you get to actually see flying and feel what it's like to land on the moon. It takes about an hour. It's experiential. Or there's one that does canoeing or kayaking down a glacier. And it's beautiful because you're moving around, and if I could feel the wind, it would be great, but it's visually gorgeous, and it's something because of my disability and my fact that I don't live near a glacier, I will probably never do. So for people with disabilities, I think that those types of experiences, they're going to get the exact same thing a lot of us are going to get out of it. From a gaming perspective, I personally think that gaming is always going to be kind of secondary in VR. I think that I'm hopeful, but everything I've played, I can only play it for about 25 minutes, and then I'm kind of nauseous and over it. So thank you very much. Thank you to our interpreters for putting up with me, and thank you for bringing me all the way from the United States to talk to you guys.
Alley Camp, October 2018.